And ethnically diverse companies outperform their peers by 35%. So there's real business outcomes to doing DEI work. With that being said, I don't want you to do diversity, equity, and inclusion work because of business outcomes. Because then what happens if the stock price goes down? What's the first thing we're going to cut? Right? We don't do DEI work because of business outcomes. We do this work because it's the right thing to do to make sure that we have the right people in the room and that people are not being overlooked. It's the right thing to do so that we can dismantle the systemic racism that created all of these inequities in our world. This is the task of our generation. And so, when you talk about DEI work, for me, actually, if we're going to do unconscious bias training, I would rather that not be under DEI. I want that to be under leadership training because this is not about just people who are passionate about DEI. This is about all of us learning how to work together. So let's talk about this work not just as, business outcomes. It turns out, let's talk about this as this is who we are. This is what we do. This is what we believe in. I'm so passionate about this. Now, with all that being said, there are business outcomes that come from having different people in the room and really like giving space to hear those voices. It actually reminds me a little bit about GPS because the way GPS works, of course, is if you've got satellites all over the globe that are all seeing the world from a different perspective. If all those satellites were in one place, you'd have all these dead spots and GPS wouldn't work. But because those satellites are spread out, they see the world differently. And that's how it works. And this is what makes us better as diverse teams. We want people on those teams that see the world differently. And we want to hear their perspective and make sure that their voice is heard. Now, one interesting thing about GPS that I didn't know, one of the hardest parts about coming up with GPS technology was having an extremely accurate measurement of the Earth. Because unlike this photo, the Earth is not a perfect sphere. It's a geoid, very hard to measure with the mountains and the hills. And so one of the hardest things about creating GPS was having an extremely accurate measurement of the Earth. So the United States Air Force had a brilliant mathematician, Dr. West, that did these mind-boggling calculations and gave us the measurement of the Earth that we needed, and that laid the foundation for GPS to work. Here's what I appreciate about Dr. West. When you're one of the most brilliant minds in the country, you've got a very big presence in the room. Some people can be intimidated. But what I appreciate and respect so much about Dr. West, I'm going to show you a picture here. Dr. West was always giving back to the community, a celebrated career, United States Air Force Hall of Fame, brilliant mind. But Dr. West is only 5'1". That's Dr. West right there, that black woman on your screen. And I wonder, as I showed that picture and I'm talking about this mathematician, I wonder, did you assume perhaps that the mathematician was the white guy? Because if you did, that's an example of unconscious bias. And we all have some unconscious bias. But can you imagine if you are hiring someone and you need a brilliant mind and these two come in the room and you're not aware of your unconscious bias, but you just have a gut feeling. Something about that guy. I think he's the right one for the job. And you're not realizing that you're making an assumption and a decision based on bias. That is not a good thing. And that's why it's so important that we're all open to this as we lean into this work.